After decades of keeping things mostly private, the actress who brought Kelly Bundy to life has finally shared what really went on behind the scenes of Married with Children. And the truth isn't scandalous in the way people might expect. It's something far more powerful. It's a story about protection, loyalty, and a bond that quietly shaped a young girl's life in one of the toughest industries in the world. When she first stepped onto that set in 1987, she was only 15. The show she was joining was bold, irreverent, and often controversial. It pushed the limits of what television allowed at the time, leaning heavily into edgy humor and provocative themes. Right in the center of it all was a teenager who was still figuring out who she was, suddenly thrust into the spotlight. What she needed more than anything wasn't fame, it was stability. And she found that in the most unexpected place. The man playing her on-screen father didn't just act like a parent when the cameras were rolling. Behind the scenes, he became something very real. He watched over her, guided her, and made sure that no matter how chaotic the environment became, she felt safe. He had already lived through the highs and lows of Hollywood. He knew exactly how unforgiving the industry could be, especially for young women. The character she played was written to be attractive, naive, and often the subject of risque jokes. In a different environment, that kind of role could have exposed her to situations no teenager should have to navigate alone. But that never happened because he made sure it didn't. He would step in when conversations went too far. He redirected moments that became inappropriate. He created a protective space around her without ever making a show of it. It wasn't part of his job description. It was simply who he chose to be. Over the 11 years the show ran, she grew up on that set. From 15 to 26, those were the years that shaped her identity, her confidence, and her understanding of the world. And throughout all of it, he remained a constant. Crew members noticed it too. Between takes, he would quietly check in on her. During difficult scenes, he positioned himself nearby. If anything felt off, he addressed it immediately. There were moments the audience never saw, like driving her home after late shoots so she wouldn't be alone, or reassuring her family that she was being looked after. What started as mentorship slowly evolved into something deeper. As she grew more confident, their dynamic shifted. She began to find her voice, contribute creatively, and stand as an equal among seasoned actors. And he watched it all with pride. But their bond was truly tested during one of the most turbulent moments in the show's history. In 1989, a single viewer launched a boycott against the show after taking offense to an episode. What followed was a wave of backlash. Advertisers pulled out, networks panicked, and cancellation suddenly became a real possibility. For a teenager whose entire career depended on that show, it was terrifying. While others scrambled behind the scenes, he stayed calm. He gathered the younger cast members and reminded them of what they had built together. He told them that regardless of what happened, they had created something meaningful, and that was something no one could take away. He also took action. He spoke to the press, defended the show, and more importantly, protected the younger actors from being dragged into the controversy. He made sure their voices were represented, even when they weren't in the room. In an ironic twist, the backlash only made the show more popular. Ratings soared, and what was meant to destroy it ended up strengthening it. But for her, the lasting memory wasn't the victory, it was who stood beside her when everything felt uncertain. Years later, when the show ended, it didn't end with closure. There was no grand finale, no emotional farewell. It simply stopped. One day they were working together, and the next it was over. After more than a decade of shared routines, laughter, and growth, the sudden silence was disorienting. The set disappeared. The daily connections vanished. The family that had defined her youth scattered. But not completely. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, their relationship didn't end. They stayed in touch. They met, talked, and continued to support each other through life's changes. What began as a professional connection had become something enduring.
As her career flourished, he watched from afar with pride. And when she faced one of the biggest challenges of her life, he was still there, just as steady as ever. In 2021, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic illness that affects the central nervous system. It was a life-altering moment. Suddenly, everyday tasks became difficult. Mobility changed. Energy levels dropped. The future she had imagined shifted dramatically. The emotional toll was just as heavy. She had spoken openly about the grief, the sense of losing a version of herself while still moving forward. It's a complex, ongoing process that doesn't have easy answers. But in that moment, the people who truly mattered showed up. Her former castmates rallied around her, offering support, encouragement, and love. And once again, the man who had protected her as a teenager made sure she knew she wasn't alone. Their bond hadn't faded with time. It had strengthened. Public appearances after her diagnosis revealed her resilience. At a ceremony honoring her career, she stood before a crowd with a cane, openly acknowledging her struggles while refusing to hide. Later, at an awards show, she received a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition of her strength, her honesty, and the impact she had made. Behind the scenes, those closest to her continued to show up in quieter ways. Messages, conversations, and simple acts of care reminded her that the connections she built all those years ago were still intact. Looking back, the real story of that sitcom isn't just about jokes or cultural impact. It's about what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. It's about an experienced actor who chose to look out for a young girl in a vulnerable position. It's about a cast that became a real support system. It's about relationships that outlasted fame, controversy, and time. Even the creative process reflected that closeness. The show allowed room for improvisation, and many iconic moments came from spontaneous interactions between the cast. Those moments weren't just performances. They were built on trust. He often used improvisation as a teaching tool, challenging her to think on her feet and react authentically. It wasn't about stealing scenes. It was about helping her grow. Every unexpected line, every shift in delivery was a lesson in becoming a better actor. And beyond the humor and boundary-pushing content, there was a clear line that was never crossed behind the scenes. Respect was non-negotiable. No matter how outrageous the characters behaved, the environment remained grounded in professionalism. Over time, small habits and inside jokes turned into defining traits of the show. Running gags evolved naturally, shaped by the chemistry between the actors. What audiences saw on screen was a reflection of something real. That authenticity is part of why the show continues to resonate. Today, the question of a reunion still lingers. Fans have hoped for years to see the cast come back together in some form. While a traditional revival may be complicated, especially given health challenges, the idea hasn't disappeared. If anything, it has evolved. New formats, like podcasts, virtual reunions, or special projects, offer possibilities that didn't exist before. And one thing remains certain. Any reunion would only happen if everyone could be included, because, at its core, that show was never just about individual characters. It was about a family, and that family still exists. The story that has emerged after all these years isn't one of scandal or hidden drama. It's something quieter, but far more meaningful. It's about loyalty, mentorship, and the kind of connection that doesn't fade with time. A teenage girl walked onto a set nearly 4 decades ago, unsure what the future would hold. She couldn't have known that she would find someone who would help guide her through it. Not just as a co-star, but as a steady presence in her life. And even now, through everything she's faced, that presence remains. Some relationships are built for a moment. Others are built to last. This one never broke.